Pay attention to the young woman seated on the couch at the hotel reception. She is 19-year-old Sophie Laurent. She is here with her 41-year-old boyfriend, Thomas Kerr. He has promised to help her start a new life, away from her parents and hometown. This hotel meeting is the first step. A couple of minutes later, they are headed to room 314, both looking happy. She did not know it yet, but this was the last time she would be seen alive. March 2011, Denmark. Sophie Laurent had been missing for over 24 hours. She had not returned home as promised. Her phone went directly to voicemail. Her mother, Anne, contacted police in Widover to file a missing persons report. The initial police response was procedural. Sophie was 19, legally an adult. Officers noted her recent history of depression and her dropout status. The case was classified as a voluntary disappearance. It was suggested that Sophie had likely run away, perhaps with a new boyfriend, and would return when she was ready. Anne Laurent did not accept this. She knew her daughter was withdrawn, but she did not believe Sophie would leave without a word, especially without her laptop. On March 17, driven by a need for answers, Anne accessed Sophie's computer. She found what she was looking for: a series of email exchanges and messages with a user identified only as TK. The messages dated back to mid-January 2011, revealing a secret, ongoing online relationship. The digital trail laid out the entire narrative. TK had promised Sophie financial support, travel opportunities, and a fresh start in Germany. He repeatedly and firmly urged her to keep their relationship and their plans completely private. He had groomed her for this, building trust through daily contact and promises of escape. Anne scrolled through the messages until she found the last one, sent by TK on the morning Sophie disappeared. It was time-stamped 1 p.m., March 15. "I'm at the hotel. Come when you're ready." On March 18, Anne Laurent brought the laptop to the Vidover police station. The case was immediately reclassified. Investigators now had a name for the hotel, a digital trail, and a new unidentified person of interest, TK. The investigation shifted focus 45 kilometers north to Helsingør. Police contacted the Havengate Budget Hotel and requested all records and security footage for March 15. They now knew where Sophie went, but they still did not know who TK was or why the footage from the hotel would show her enter but never leave. Armed with the digital messages, investigators arrived at the Havengate Budget Hotel on March 19. They requested all check-in records and security footage for March 15. The hotel's register showed that room 314 was checked out to one person, Thomas Kerr, 41. The name matched the initials, TK, from Sophie's emails. Police now had a name. They turned to the security footage. They watched the lobby camera, seeing Sophie enter at 2:40 p.m. and sit. They watched Thomas Kerr enter at 2:48 p.m., check in, and meet her. Then they watched the third-floor camera as the pair walked to room 314 and disappeared inside at 2:52 p.m. The investigators kept watching. They fast-forwarded through the rest of the day and into the night. Sophie Laurent never reappeared. The footage did, however, show Thomas Kerr leaving the hotel alone the next day, March 16, around 1:20 p.m. On March 20, detectives located Thomas Kerr at his residence in Roskilde. He was a 41-year-old software engineer with no prior criminal record. He was brought in for questioning. At first, he denied knowing anyone named Sophie Laurent. Investigators then showed him the still images from the hotel lobby. His story changed. Kerr admitted he had been messaging Sophie and that they met at the hotel. He described their relationship as consensual. He claimed they spent a few hours talking in the room, but then they argued. According to Kerr, Sophie had unrealistic expectations about the money and help he was offering. He stated that she became upset and left the room around 8 p.m. He told police he assumed she was being dramatic and had simply gone home. He said he stayed the night alone and checked out the next day. It was a simple, plausible explanation, but the police had a problem. They had reviewed all the footage from the lobby, the main stairwell, and the elevator banks. Thomas Kerr was seen leaving. Sophie Laurent was not. The focus shifted immediately to room 314. But by the time police identified the room as relevant, it was March 19. The hotel, operating normally, had already cleaned the room. New guests had checked in on March 17 at 18. The scene was contaminated. Despite the delay, a forensic team was dispatched on March 21 to conduct a delayed examination. They searched the room, which appeared clean to the naked eye. However, using luminol and high-intensity lights, they found what they were looking for. On the bathroom floor near the drain were trace amounts of blood. More traces were found on the wooden bed frame near the headboard. The samples were small, but they were enough. DNA analysis was rushed. The blood belonged to Sophie Laurent. The evidence proved Thomas Kerr's story was false. Sophie had not just argued and left, she had been injured inside that room. On March 23, investigators brought in a cadaver dog. The dog was led into room 314, and after sniffing the perimeter, it gave a strong, definitive alert. It signaled not at the bed nor the bathroom, but at the empty closet by the door. Sophie had bled in the room, and the scent of death was left in the closet. But the room was empty. This meant Kerr had not just lied, he had cleaned the room and removed her body. Investigators now faced two urgent, chilling questions. Where was Sophie, and what else had they missed? The evidence from room 314 proved Sophie Laurent had been harmed. The cadaver dog's alert suggested her body had been concealed in the closet. The lack of footage of her leaving, combined with the non-functional camera at the hotel's rear service exit, created a strong theory. Thomas Kerr had manually removed her from the building. The investigation's focus turned to his vehicle. On March 22, Thomas Kerr's dark blue Volkswagen Passat was impounded from his residence in Roskilde and transported to a police forensic garage. Teams began a meticulous search of the vehicle. The interior of the car, the cabin, seats, and floor mats was clean, but the trunk told a different story. Under forensic analysis, the trunk lining yielded three critical types of trace evidence. First, investigators recovered several strands of long blonde hair. Microscopic comparison and subsequent DNA testing confirmed the hair was a positive match to Sophie Laurent. Second, they found fibers. These fibers were not from Sophie's clothing, but their color and material were consistent with the bedspreads used at the Havnegade budget hotel. Third, forensic technicians vacuumed and collected soil samples embedded in the trunk's carpet lining and on a folding shovel found in the garage. This soil was analyzed. It did not match the soil composition of Roskilde, where Kerr lived. It also did not match the soil around the hotel in Helsingør. This evidence proved that Kerr's car had been to a third, unknown, and likely rural location. The physical evidence was now overwhelming. Sophie's hair was in his trunk. Fibers matching the hotel bedspread, which the case file noted he had wrapped her in, were in his trunk. And unknown soil samples linked him to an unidentified site. This evidence directly contradicted his story of her walking away. It was the physical proof that Sophie did not leave the hotel on her own. She was carried out in his trunk. On March 24, 2011, Thomas Kerr was arrested and formally charged with the murder of Sophie Laurent. The basis for the arrest was the combined forensic evidence. The charge was murder, but the investigation still had a critical missing piece: Sophie's body. For 5 days, Kerr was held in police custody. Under intense interrogation, he maintained his story that Sophie had left the hotel. He was methodical and calm, denying all involvement. Detectives presented him with the evidence piece by piece. This evidence directly contradicted his story of her walking away. It was the physical proof that Sophie did not leave the hotel on her own. She was carried out in his trunk. On March 29, 2011, Thomas Kerr's composure fractured. Confronted with the irrefutable physical proof, Thomas Kerr's story changed for a second and final time. He admitted that Sophie Laurent had died in room 314. But it was an accident, he claimed. He told investigators that they had engaged in consensual sex that got rough. He stated that Sophie began to panic and became hysterical. He said he tried to calm her down, to quiet her, and that things went too far. He admitted to placing his hands on her, but insisted he didn't mean to kill her. He confessed to panicking after he realized she was dead. He admitted to wrapping her body, removing it from the hotel via the unmonitored rear exit, and placing it in his car. The confession confirmed the investigators' entire theory. It connected the hotel room to the vehicle. But when detectives asked the most important question, "Where is she now?" Kier refused to answer. He admitted to the act, but would not reveal the location of her body. The partial confession was a breakthrough, but it was incomplete. Sophie was dead, but she was still missing. This refusal created a new problem for the prosecution. Without a body, Kier could still attempt to argue his accidental death theory. The investigation needed Sophie. Detectives turned back to the digital evidence, focusing on Kier's cell phone records for the critical window, the early morning hours of March 16th, after he left the hotel with Sophie's body. His phone did not travel south toward his home in Roskilde. Instead, the record showed his device pinging cell towers north of Helsingør. The phone moved along Route 6, heading toward Gilleleje, a coastal area in North Zealand. This data defined a new focused search area for police. Teams began combing the remote forests and coastal parks in the region. The search continued for weeks. Finally, on April 5, 2011, 3 weeks after Sophie disappeared, the case broke. A groundskeeper at Gora Lake, Gora Sur, a secluded forested area approximately 12 kilometers inland from Helsingør, was clearing debris. Near the water's edge, beneath a cluster of birch trees, he noticed an unusual mound of disturbed earth. The soil appeared recently overturned, and there was a faint, unfamiliar odor. He immediately contacted local authorities. Police arrived that afternoon and began a careful excavation. At a depth of approximately 1 meter, their shovels struck a large object. It was a duffel bag, wrapped in black plastic sheeting and secured with duct tape. They cleared the soil and opened the bag. Inside, still partially wrapped in the distinct bedspread from the Havnegade budget hotel, was the body of Sophie Laurent. Her identity was confirmed by dental records within 48 hours. The search was over. Sophie had been found. Now the medical examiner would speak. The autopsy would provide the final objective testimony that would dismantle Thomas Kier's story. The discovery of Sophie's body was the final piece of the physical investigation. On April 7, 2011, a full autopsy was conducted. The results provided the objective, silent testimony that would dismantle Thomas Kier's story. Kier had claimed Sophie's death was an accident, a moment of panic during rough sex that got too far. The medical examiner's findings proved this was a lie. The official cause of death was asphyxiation due to manual strangulation. This was not a quick or accidental act. The autopsy revealed petechial hemorrhaging, tiny burst blood vessels in Sophie's eyes, and deep tissue bruising around her neck. This was evidence of sustained severe pressure being applied for what the pathologist estimated to be between 2 and 3 minutes. It was a deliberate, violent, and intentional killing. The findings also contradicted Cor's claims of consensual activity. The report detailed significant defensive bruising on Sophie's forearms, wrists, and inner thighs, indicating she had fought her attacker. Furthermore, the examiner found evidence of recent sexual activity, but it was accompanied by internal tearing, suggesting the encounter was forcible and non-consensual. The forensic report was a complete refutation of Cor's confession. He had not accidentally panicked. He had overpowered, sexually assaulted, and murdered her. The autopsy also finalized the link between Cor and the burial site. Soil samples taken from the grave at Gore Lake were sent to the lab. They were a perfect match to the specific unusual soil samples recovered from the trunk of his Volkswagen Passat. Tire tracks found on a narrow access road near the burial site were also consistent with the tread pattern of Cor's vehicle. The prosecution had a complete, unshakable case. The trial of Thomas Kierra began in Copenhagen District Court in September 2011. The prosecution's case was methodical, built on a chain of undisputed scientific evidence. The medical examiner's findings proved Sophie's death was not an accident. It was a violent, manual strangulation that lasted several minutes, preceded by a sexual assault she had clearly fought against. Kerr's legal team attempted to argue for diminished capacity due to emotional distress. They portrayed Kerr as a lonely man who panicked when the encounter went wrong. This argument was rejected by the court's own psychiatric evaluators, who found Kerr fully competent and aware of his actions. He was not a man who panicked. He was a methodical predator. His lack of remorse was noted by investigators. During his final interviews after the body was found, he made a statement that chilled prosecutors. When asked to explain his actions, Kerr reportedly said, "She wanted to leave her old life behind. I just helped her." On November 22, 2011, after a short deliberation, the court found Thomas Kerr guilty of premeditated murder. The judge, in his sentencing, cited the aggravating factors: the cynical deception used to lure Sophie, the extreme violence of the killing, and the calculated methodical concealment of her body in a shallow grave. Thomas Kerr was sentenced to life imprisonment, which under Danish law at the time meant a minimum of 16 years. He did not appeal the verdict. The trial was over. Justice, in a legal sense, had been served. But for Sophie's family and community, the verdict was not an end. It was the beginning of a life sentence of their own.